Production support for InFocus is provided by Smithville, a locally owned business serving central and southern Indiana since 1922 with residential and business internet, voice, and security services. Smithville, local pride, global technology. Information at smithville.net. Hoosier Energy, providing electricity for central and southern Indiana electric cooperatives and their member customers. Information at hepn.com. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
During the 2011 legislative session, Indiana House Democrats protested a majority Republican agenda by staying in Illinois for nearly 5 weeks. During their absence, House Republicans continued to demand education reform, and in April, House Bill 1003 was passed. The law allows children from poorer backgrounds to have their families apply for state scholarships or vouchers, which they can then spend at any approved school their family chooses. Democratic leaders eventually accepted an offer to extend the vouchers to 7,500 children for the first year and 15,000 the second. But the Indiana State Teachers Association is now backing a suit against the state, saying the law is unconstitutional. Tonight, we'll look at the state's voucher program and the impact it may have on Indiana's learning landscape as we put education in focus. And thanks for joining us for this edition of InFocus. I'm Stan Jastrzebski. If you have questions for one of our studio experts during tonight's program, please email them to us at infocus@indiana.edu or leave your comments on our website. That's indianapublicmedia.org/infocus. Well, after a landmark legislative session, the Indiana Department of Education is now defending itself against claims that the comprehensive education reforms it promoted violate the federal and state constitution. Arguably receiving the most attention is Indiana's voucher program. And while officials agree there is no silver bullet solution to Indiana's education woes, WTIU's Alex Roy reports the benefits of the state's voucher program could be overshadowed by controversy.
Disagreement is dominating discussion about the voucher program in Indiana. 3,200 students have applied for vouchers and will be or already are attending a private school, many of them with religious affiliation, using taxpayer dollars. The Indiana State Teachers Association is suing the state on the grounds the Choice Scholarship Program violates Article 1 of Indiana's Constitution, which says state tax dollars cannot directly fund religious institutions.
That religious institution is going to have a religious element in pretty much everything it does. I taught in parochial schools before I began my public school career, and I know that there was an element of faith in everything I taught.
Meredith says that is not where the money should be going. All but 6 of the 242 private schools participating have religious affiliations. But it's the state's contention that education dollars should follow a child's learning needs, whether it be in a public, non-public, or religious institution.
No one is being forced to attend a religious school. This legislation simply gives parents a choice. It gives them the opportunity to use the money that is already directed to their children's education.
The ISTA filed a preliminary injunction aimed at halting the program before the school year started. But last week, a Marion County judge denied the motion.
The folks that are involved in advocating for school choice are well connected and are national organizations, and we're very familiar with case law and what happened in other states or jurisdictions, and they tried to avoid those same pitfalls with Indiana's new law.
At an average of $5,000 per student, and with 7,500 vouchers available in the first year, that's $37 million public schools will no longer have. But the state says that's a non-issue because those students won't be counted in the funding formula anymore.
That schools should receive funding for the children that they actually educate. So I think that at the end of the day, like I said, what this program does is it gives families of lesser means the same choice that families of greater means have.
Families at 150% of the free and reduced lunch level are eligible to apply for vouchers. Meredith says if religious institutions were not allowed to participate, she may not oppose a voucher program, but would still argue the funding piece.
Some of our most challenged students have even less support in their schools to give them the resources and the remediation and the programs that they need in order to catch up and close that, we begin to close that achievement gap. I just think it's the wrong time to even have the conversation about vouchers.
Whether voucher programs actually promote academic success is an entirely different story.
Generally, though, the parents are very active and involved, and student enthusiasm is pretty high because they've made that active choice to be enrolled in that private school. So from that standpoint, buy-in and support, attendance is up usually, and therefore that does sometimes lead to better academic outcomes for those kids.
The ISTA says it will move forward with the lawsuit, but for now, several thousand children are beginning classes as part of the largest first-year voucher program in United States history. For WTIU News, I'm Alex Roy.
And my co-host for this evening is Kyle Stokes. He's an education reporter for State Impact Indiana. Kyle, good evening. Tell us who you're talking to tonight.
Yeah, good evening, Stan. We're speaking tonight to Dick Comer, who is a senior attorney for the Institute of Justice. He's been on the side of the state of Indiana throughout this voucher lawsuit, and he's been heavily involved in this litigation, despite the fact that he's been in Washington the entire time. But he does have extensive experience in school voucher lawsuits. We'll ask him about it coming up here later on InFocus. Right now, let's send it back to you, Stan, and our in-studio panel.
Thanks, Kyle. And joining us in studio tonight, our attorney and policy analyst, Rebecca Billick, education philosophy professor with the Indiana University School of Education, Barry Bull, and Mike Baldamero, who's the head of school at Lighthouse Christian Academy here in Bloomington. Thanks to the three of you for being here. Rebecca, I want to start with you. If you can, quickly, can you give us sort of Vouchers 101? Where have they been tried before? What are some of the different methods that have been used, and how have those things fared in terms of improving educational outcomes?
Well, I'm not really, the focus of our research to date wasn't really on whether or not vouchers was a good idea or a bad idea over at the Center for Education and Policy, Evaluation and Policy. What our focus was what has happened in other states. And what's really notable and what a lot of people, I believe, tend to miss in the debate about school vouchers is that the constitutions of each state are very different. And what is allowed in one state isn't necessarily going to be a good comparison to what's allowed in Indiana. So we have approximately 24 school choice programs of some kind throughout the country. But, like I said, the constitutions of each of those states are very different. So what happens in one state necessarily isn't applicable to what happens in Indiana.
My next question, we'll go down to Mike first, and we'll come back down the line here. You heard Teresa Meredith in our opening package there say that the contention from the Indiana State Teachers Association and that side of the lawsuit is this may be going against separation of church and state as outlined by the Indiana Constitution. You're the head of a religious school here in town. I'd like your opinion first, and then Barry's, and then Rebecca's, on how that argument breaks down in your mind.
Sure. A number of schools are religious schools. Lighthouse Christian Academy doesn't make any apology for that. That's part of our curriculum. And as she said, faith is a real part of everything that happens in our classrooms. But I think there's a distinction between what happens in our classrooms and the way the legislation was written. It was written to support parent choice and designed to promote what they would like to see in education. And that's where we lean on the whole subject.
Barry, your thoughts?
Well, honestly, this is really an abstract legal issue here. I suspect that my opinions about this don't really matter. I think that however the law comes down, I, as an education researcher, am really concerned about the ultimate effects on student performance, on parental satisfaction, and so on. And I think that's where the real issues for me lie.
Rebecca, as an attorney, what are some of the ways you could see looking at either side of this case?
Well, we spent a lot of time researching this, and actually when I approached the issue, my gut was telling me this was not legal, that you couldn't do this, it would be against Indiana's Constitution. But when looking at Indiana's Constitution, the new statutes really promote are for the benefit of education, not for religion. And in Cleveland, the argument was made that, that because there's religious education, or the most of the money goes to religious schools, that's a problem. But bottom line, it comes down to parent choice. And people of all means should be able to choose where they want to educate their children.